Tonight we take a look at an incredible story of Father Matthew Hood, a Michigan priest who recently discovered through watching old family videos that his baptism was invalid.
When the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith came out with their statement on the words for baptism, they clearly said that the words "we baptize you" is not valid. So I found out that I was never validly baptized, which means if baptism is the gateway to the sacraments, that all of my other sacraments were invalid as well. So I needed to receive all of them.
Well, as you heard, Father Hood has since been validly baptized, confirmed, and ordained. Now, joining me now with more on the story is Edward Condon, D.C. Bureau Chief for the Catholic News Agency and a canon lawyer. Ed, thanks for joining us. Good to see you again.
Always a pleasure.
This is an incredible story. As soon as Father Hood saw the video and he heard the word we know that something was wrong, but some of our viewers might not understand what the problem was. Can you explain it for us?
Surely. I mean, this is the thing about the sacraments, is they depend for their validity on certain criteria that the Church lays out in its teaching, matter and form, basically what you do and what you do it with and how you say it and how you do it. Now, in this case, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith issued this clarification in July saying that you can't say "we baptize you" in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You have to say "I." And they made a number of theological reflections on why this was so important. They talked about the teaching of the Second Vatican Council. They talked about the teachings of the Council of Trent. They talked a lot about the Scriptures. And to say that really the Church teaches that the act of baptism is an individual act. It's a one-on-one encounter between the minister of the sacrament through whom Christ is acting and the person receiving the sacrament of baptism. So it's not possible for it to be a sort of joint effort, if you like. And at the same time, to say "we baptize you" is, if you like, not just stepping outside the Church's criteria, but it's stepping away from the Church's teaching.
And Father Hood has since received his sacraments and been ordained. And what's he been dealing like personally?
I imagine this has been an extremely confusing and difficult time for Father Hood. But certainly in all of the interviews that he's given, including to us at CNA, he's been a model of exactly what you'd expect, which is faith, that this is something that he has dealt with in, I think, an exemplary way. The thing he told us was, God is not a liar, that just because he turned out that his baptism in 1990 wasn't valid and therefore neither of his other sacraments, including confirmation and ordination, that this didn't mean he'd never had a relationship with God, that he'd never had a relationship with the Holy Spirit. On the contrary, that he'd been receiving clearly graces throughout his entire life, which has sustained him and got him where he was and also sustained him through this time.
And what are the implications for Catholics who received the sacraments from Father Hood before his baptism was valid?
Well, the simple fact is, if you're not a priest, there are certain things you can't do. You can't forgive sins sacramentally. You can't celebrate the Eucharist validly. You can't confirm people. So these are all things that Father Hood has presumably been doing during his 3 years when he thought he was a priest. And in many cases, many Catholics will have to go and get those sacraments repeated. But of course, unlike his own original attempted baptism, the baptisms that Father Hood has performed over the years are certainly valid. Because, of course, anyone can baptize validly, provided they use the right words.
And for those who have questions, should they talk to their local priest, things like that?
Absolutely, but I think it's important that Catholics not succumb to a kind of council of paranoia here. Father Hood's case is exceptional, and it is exactly that. It's an exception. Certainly, if you were baptized in that parish by the permanent deacon in question during those years, you might have reason to suspect something needs to be looked into. But I think in general, the Church and Catholics more generally should presume in the wisdom of the Church and the validity of their sacraments, and not try to make the exception into the rule.
Edward Condon, D.C. Bureau Chief for the Catholic News Agency, thank you so much. Very interesting story.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.